This is Inspiring Women, and I'm Laurie McGraw. Today I'm speaking with Carolyn Starrett. She is the CEO of Flatiron Health. And actually, we've got sort of a common background here. Brown University, Kellogg School of Management, some interesting work. However, years before, Carolyn was after me. But she has many years in consulting, Boston Consulting Group, and she's been the CEO of Flatiron for the past year plus, 2 years actually. And so, Carolyn, thank you so much for being on Inspiring Women.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation and a big fan of what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Well, we are always showcasing incredible women on Inspiring Women. And the point is about, the path to leadership and not just what you're doing, but also how you got there. So why don't we start with that, Carolyn? Give us a little bit of the bio sketch. How did you get to be CEO of Flatiron Health?
So I actually joined Flatiron just over 7 years ago now as one of the earlier members of the leadership team, and have been kind of through the journey of both an acquisition and then stepped into the CEO role, succeeding our two co-founders when they transitioned on. Prior to Flatiron, I've spent most of my career in enterprise technology. I did some strategy consulting. So this was a really intentional choice for me to try to think about how to blend my background in technology and data and apply it to really important healthcare problems in the cancer space. Let's see. Well, I'm born in the Bay Area. I went to high school and college. We share the Brown connection on the East Coast. I've lived in 6 different cities since then. I love adventure and trying new things. Interestingly, I was an English and economics major at college, but I've always been fascinated by technology and science. And I think one of the driving forces in my life is I'm just deeply curious. And so I have found myself throughout my career drawn to roles that where I see an opportunity for data and technology to really transform how we experience the world and how we can make that experience better.
I want to talk about, obviously what you're doing at Flatiron, but let's talk about that sort of, professional journey. So as an economics and English major, that doesn't necessarily translate to science and data and innovation and technology. But that's where you are. Did you think about when you were growing up, did you think about that you would be a CEO someday? Was that the sort of vision that you had of your professional grown-up self or not?
Definitely not. I think it's actually funny. They ask this question on like password settings. Sometimes, what did you want to be when you're a kid? And my mom always reminds me that I said I wanted to be a judge. And I don't know where that came from, a sense of like understanding data and fairness or equity, but
maybe just holding the gavel.
Who knows? Maybe there was a latent sense of wanting to be in charge. But as I got further into my career, I think I learned that what I loved was working with people and feeling like I could have a real impact and solve problems that mattered. And so that led me down a path of taking on increasing roles of responsibility in organizations. And it was about building teams and setting a strategy. And so I never really had, I kind of always thought that my end goal was getting to run a business that I felt where I felt I got to work with incredible people and solve real problems that mattered. And each step of the way, I've kind of taken on greater responsibility, and it's been, bigger scope and bigger scale. And that really culminated in my time at Flatiron and the opportunity to step into the CEO role here.
Well, let's talk about Flatiron. So certainly, in the world of healthcare and tech and data and innovation, Flatiron certainly has a storied background in terms of being an oncology EHR type of company, and then a $2 billion sale to Roche. And so now you are leading that incredible organization. So let's talk about it. So, what do you do day to day at Flatiron as CEO? And how is it being a very important data organization within a larger scale global organization?
Absolutely. So maybe starting with Flatiron, we are a health tech company. Our mission, since we were founded in 2011, 11 has been to improve and extend lives by learning from the experience of every person with cancer. And so we tackle that challenge using machine learning and real world evidence to really start to expand the possibilities for what we can learn about what drugs make sense in what settings, how we can better power clinical trials and understanding, and how we can use data for good to really reimagine the infrastructure of cancer care. And so that's really been our guiding focus at Flatiron. Today, as CEO, I think when I step back, my job is really split in probably, no one day looks the same, but split in 4 different ways. It's how do I set the vision and strategy and ensure that we have a really clear sense of the path forward and the most important ways that we can achieve that mission that I just talked about. How do we set the right goals with the right objectives so that we are ruthlessly focused on driving progress, especially in this environment. Number 2, how do we make sure we have the right people on the team, the right leadership, the right collaboration? How do we ensure that we have the right systems and process to enable people to do their best work so that we can live up to that potential that I certainly see? And then lastly, I think it's the intangible pieces. It's the culture. It's how do we how do I help infuse the values that are important to creating a workplace that I think will enable us to have maximum impact for all of our customers and for cancer patients around the world.
Well, you sound like a real CEO focused on those, 4 core areas of vision and strategy, as well as execution, process, and people. And that's clearly important, but you're in a pretty special place. I mean, a place of, we need innovation in cancer care. The breakthroughs are apparent in terms of what could be, yet all of us have experienced cancer in some way, whether, personally or through a family member. So let's talk about, some of the breakthroughs. So since you've been CEO for over 2 years now, what have you done? And I know that you spent a lot of time in the international space. So this is not just a company focused on cancer and cancer care in the United States. So what are the big breakthroughs? What are the things that you're excited about in terms of what you're doing at Flatiron?
Yeah. So I stepped into the CEO role just over 2 years ago now, and it's been a real period of change for us, I would say. We were in the throes of the pandemic. We were 3 years out from being acquired. We have had a lot of, very both anticipated and natural kind of leadership transition. And so it's been a period of really resetting how we think long-term, resetting like what the next chapter can be and what our true long-term ambitions are. And so I think, one of the biggest breakthroughs is just, building and resetting our leadership team, reestablishing that kind of long-term vision for who we want to be. And when I think about like what that means for us specifically, so a couple of things. We're really expanding our focus from what was historically learning from real world data, learning from kind of retrospective experience of routine care, to thinking about how we can help play a role in generating the evidence required to understand and advance the best medicines in the right settings. And so, a year ago, we acquired a company that helps with all of the data management in clinical trials, and we're really focused on thinking about how we can make evidence generation in clinical trials more efficient, more representative of the patients who are going to benefit from those medicines, and less of a burden on sponsors and sites and patients. As you said, we're really focused on our international expansion. So we're operating now in the UK, Germany, and Japan. We have announced an initial partnership with the National Cancer Center Hospital East in Japan last year. We have several more announcements coming up in the next few weeks in Europe. And we're really on track to deliver our first data sets to pharma customers this year internationally. I think that's really important because, we often see drugs that are approved here in the US that just aren't available to patients around the world. The standard of care looks incredibly different. And I think we got to learn faster and smarter how to build the case that to make those drugs kind of available wherever patients might benefit.
Well, congratulations on those expansions and those announcements. I want to ask you about, so, this stuff is complicated. Okay. We all just watched, Pear Therapeutics, this very exciting company with, real world evidence and trying to bring data at the forefront of delivery, but yet it didn't work. It didn't, and that's a different space, but somewhat similar to Flatiron. Flatiron is working. So what are some of the secrets about that in terms of taking these complex systems, bringing them into technology, and then bringing, whether it's real world evidence or data, to the point of care, and then also accelerating drug discovery or whatever might be needed for improvements or advancements in cancer?
Yeah. I mean, healthcare is a really challenging space to operate in. And I say that as someone who came, from a background in technology companies. I grew up in the Silicon Valley during the first tech bubble was when I entered the workforce. And, the combination of regulation, incentives, the nuance and interpretation of evidence in truly understanding equity and bias in this system. It's just really complex. So I don't think there's a single silver bullet, if you will. I think to your question, what I think we're really excited about is the idea that we can do more and learn faster when we collaborate and bring stakeholders across the ecosystem together to think about how we solve these problems in an integrated and a cohesive way. And we're seeing that happening in big ways in the US with the evolution of value-based care. And, there's CMS has a new oncology payment model that's coming out that will drive, and each one of these has driven innovation. We're seeing this in the public-private collaboration with regulatory bodies where we think about how do we work with the FDA here in the US? How do we work with NICE in terms of, reimbursement in Europe to jointly come together and think about all sides of how we advance what is truly most important, which is outcomes for patients?
Well, I want to talk about the patient side of things, but in terms of some of these larger programs, the Cancer Moonshot is out there. And this is sort of, it was announced years ago. It has some new life under this current administration. Should we be hopeful? Is the Cancer Moonshot going to happen? How do you think about that from a Flatiron perspective?
Yeah, I'm really optimistic, honestly. I think, these things have a way of taking longer than we would all like, and they play out over decades, not years. But I think we're seeing really increasing momentum and recognition that the current system is just not sustainable, and things need to change. Where we are is not acceptable for patients. The cost of the system is not sustainable for society. And quite honestly, the technology, the tools that we have available to us now are so much more advanced than they were. We can't not take advantage of the evolution in AI and large language models and ML and the ability to make better decisions across the way. So I'm really optimistic. On the Cancer Moonshot, I just think it's a great rally cry to help bring all these stakeholder groups together. And we were part of the early announcement. We are very excited to support the progress that's happening. And what I love about that is the rally cry to really focus all of our attention on reducing the cancer death rate by 50% over the next 25 years. I think we can't talk about that enough. We can't give it enough visibility. And this kind of a structure will help bring together and really shine a spotlight on the really important work that needs to happen across all sectors.
Well, I think that your comments about sort of, multiple stakeholders and collaboration, those are critical. And that includes sort of, with competition as well as customers that you're talking about. So that's a big deal. And I really appreciate you saying that. But I'm also glad that you mentioned equity. Some of these advances in innovation really come down to being fantastic advances for people who can have, but not all people who have not. So how are you thinking about that in terms of innovation in cancer and ensuring that there's both access and affordability for all people with cancer?
Yeah. so important. I mean, I think it's one of the really foundational elements is the evidence that we're looking at and how we interpret that evidence. You think about the legacy clinical trial system, there are very unique things that we can only learn from a randomized clinical trial. And yet the reality is we are not enrolling patients in those trials that are representative of patients who are going to ultimately benefit from those treatments. The patients that enroll tend to be wealthier, healthier, whiter, more educated, and that just is not a sustainable model. So I think first and foremost, we have a real opportunity to learn from more representative evidence when we think about how to bring real world data into the mix and how that can both supplement and complement the work that happens.
How do you do it? How do you do it? How are you approaching that at Flatiron so that you can get the more representative data samples from clinical trials, bring people into those studies so it's not just all white, all male, whatever it might be?
So there's two real ways. First is the foundation of Flatiron's, history, which is learning from real world data. And especially with the advances in AI and ML, we can now learn from experiences across all patients once those drugs are approved and understand efficacy in the real world, comparative effectiveness, understand where disparities exist, study those dynamics and think about how we create the right interventions. And then on the trial side, we also just need to do better in how we enroll patients, where we find them, how we design trials to make sure that's no longer the case. And so one of the places that we're most focused on is building technology that can reduce the burden for sites and sponsors and bringing trials to where patients are. Right now, most trials are enrolled in academic medical centers and that are hard to get to and not accessible for patients. And so we work with a lot of community sites that are close to home, that are accessible, and we want to make the trials that are available as standard of care to anyone, really integrating research and care into one common experience.
Well, Carolyn, I just hope that you are successful at all that. And I know that before you became CEO, you were responsible for the community network at Flatiron. So understanding not just the academic settings of delivery of excellent care, but also other places where cancer care is delivered. So again, fingers crossed that you make all the advances that you're talking about. They can't come soon enough. I want to come back to you. I'm sorry I spent so much time on that, but it's such an important space. So you've been CEO now for over 2 years, and what surprised you? What's been easier than you thought it might have been? What has been harder than you might have thought it had been?
Yeah. So let's see. Starting with the easy. I mean, I think I've always been really passionate about our mission, and so channeling that passion into the role and my excitement and energy has just been really catalyzing for me personally, and I hope for my team. And we also have just a really unique culture at Flatiron and incredible people, this great foundation of talent and expertise and assets. And so we have an incredible foundation to build on, and it's made it easy to do this work. And I think that's what draws me to the journey ahead and, draws a lot of our team members to want to be a part of it. On the more challenging side, let's see. So I think I mentioned this. I wasn't ever sure that I wanted to be a CEO, and some of the challenges are expected and some are kind of less expected for me. So, one that I've been grappling with is just the loneliness of kind of being the only person in the company that has one full vantage point across everything that's happening. And no one else in the company has that. And there's part of what made me successful at every step before this was getting really good at building consensus. And now my job is about solely owning and being accountable for the highest stakes, least clear decisions that we have to make. And it's that's a position of incredible, privilege, but also
challenge.
at times.
It's hard. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
lonely at the top. It's not a saying, it's a fact. And so, most senior executive level women, they talk about sort of their tribe. So and we also know that, the C-suite is often a male suite, and not as many women around those tables. Do you have a tribe? Do you have a set of people that you rely on outside of the company that help support you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, mentorship and sponsorship has been such a huge part of the journey, because part of that challenge of loneliness is also just the one of patience and knowing kind of when to stay the course and when is enough, and when to make a challenge when something isn't working, or sorry, when to make a change when something isn't working out as planned. So I've been really lucky to have men show up for me throughout my career as really incredible mentors and sponsors. I, started in a job at a company called Juniper Networks, where I was one of the youngest people in the company and one of the only female product managers in a very tech-led environment. And through my time since then, I haven't had the opportunity to work for another female leader. And so I've both had the experience of learning from and being sponsored by men, and also the privilege of mentorship and kind of indirect learning from all of these incredible female mentors along the way. And I think there are two things that have really helped me personally in both of those situations. I mean, the first has just been focus on results and building a reputation as someone who delivers, someone that people want on their team, someone that people want to work for. Like, there's just no substitute in, no matter who you are, no matter how you identify, for being someone who can drive impact.
Results is not a gender thing. Results is results, and people who deliver results are going to get attention, sponsorship, and mentorship from the highest levels. I think that is an excellent point to make. Carolyn, as we close out here on Inspiring Women, I appreciate this conversation so much. As you look back on your career so far, which is, I would just say, a so far point in time, can you maybe just close out with some advice maybe that you received along the way that stuck out for you, that was helpful to you on your particular career journey?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the second half of what I was going to say, actually, because I just don't want to leave that unfinished, is results matter. But I think what has been uniquely important to me is also the human relationships that I've built around the way. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to really focus not on being transactional in that setting, but being really vulnerable and open in my goals and in the support that I need, whether it's from no matter who it's from, male, female. And so, it's often really hard to ask for help. Now that I'm in a position of privilege and power, I see how much how more frequent it is that men in my organization come to me asking for exactly what they need than the women. And so I think some of that for me personally has stemmed from, concern of not being good enough, or concern about, being vulnerable in showing what I need. And every time I have kind of surmounted that and had a really open and honest conversation, I found it actually played out for the better. I was able to get more support. I built more trust. I felt more connected to that individual. And so I think, personally, and then in, how I've navigated the complex environment, that's been truly most important to me.
So is that the advice that you would give to others?
So I think that's kind of advice in terms of navigating the boys club, if you will. Personally, I guess I would leave folks with follow your heart. The other thing I've noticed, especially over the last 5 years, is how much of my career I was fixated on doing what I thought I should do, not what felt right and true for me. And it's very hard to sometimes, cut out all of that noise. But I really believe if you find your passion and you're doing things that inspire you, that kind of magnifies, that kind of follows you in everything you do. And so for me, staying true to myself, staying true to kind of what gets me fired up to come into work every morning, has, each step of the way been the thing that actually unlocks new opportunities.
Well, I think that is a great set of comments. We'll close out on that. And again, as I said, I'm rooting for you. You're in an important space. We need advancement in cancer care, and we want that Cancer Moonshot to work. So this is Inspiring Women. I'm Laurie McGraw. I've been speaking with Carolyn Starrett. And Carolyn, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Laurie.
This has been an episode of Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We are produced by Kate Cruz at Executive Podcast Solutions. More episodes can be found on inspiringwomen.show. I am Laurie McGraw, and thank you for listening.